Okay, good evening everyone. We are live. Oof, and I forgot. I have to do this. There's a button thing I have to push. So it's going to be out of sync, but... And there's no play button. What's going on? What am I doing wrong? Oh no, they've changed it. Okay, note to support. I don't see a play button anymore. I can't start the synchronized broadcast. Okay. Unless it's moved. But I don't see it. So tonight is question and answer, as usual. We have 16 questions, 16 really good questions. I mean, not to judge, but feel like it's nice, it's impressive to see people with intelligent questions and thoughtful questions that deserve to be answered. So I'll do my best. I wanted to say something about something. The fact that it seems easy to become more than you are when you're in a position of a teacher, so that your word becomes more than it is. What I mean to say, people put you up on a pedestal, and I want to caution about that it's not true because someone says it, it's true because it's true. So challenge the things I say and don't just believe them. Or sometimes you believe things because you don't know them, but you respect someone, and so you believe them. And that can be good because it helps put you in the right direction. But be aware that you're just believing it. Don't confuse that with knowledge. You don't know something because you believe me when I say it. I mean, all I'm trying to say is don't hold me up as a guru or something, no? I don't want to be that. I don't think I should be that. I mean, the most dangerous thing about this, and I think what I've been criticized for many years since I started, is promoting myself and pumping myself up to be some kind of ajahn or teacher. There was this whole thing. Someone commented a long comment about how I'm a fake and an imposter because I haven't been given the authority to be called an ajahn. And it's funny coming from Thailand because that, as I said, they use that word for everything. Everyone's called an ajahn. Public school teachers are called ajahn even. Anyway, so I want to be clear that that's certainly not the intention, and it's not something that we should foster. The idea that I'm anything, it's nothing to do with me. I do understand, I accept that I have an ability to teach, fairly good ability. I mean, I've been doing this for many years now. So teaching is not something that I'm incompetent at. That's fine. I mean, you can admire that in a person. But, it's a skill that you gain over time, or perhaps also because your brain works well. The brain is an organ that we use to process information, to record information. It's like your iPhone. The brain is like that. You store information and you say, what was that I was thinking of? And bing, it pops up. Okay, brain. I say, okay, Siri. Hey, brain. What did the Buddha say about this? And if you got a good brain, it comes back. And if you're good at organizing information and so on. We all have different models and makes of phones, smartphones. Brains are similar. But it's not something to worship. If you're going to worship the Buddha. I think that's okay. I think we have to understand that it's okay in a different way from worshipping your teacher. I don't think it's fair to worship even an arahant, even Sariputta or Moggallana, not in the same way. I think it's fair to say that Moggallana and Sariputta could get things wrong. Not a lot, they were pretty special. But arahants can get things wrong. And so to say nothing of ordinary teachers and, so. And this thing is spinning again, so I don't think the UI is yet working perfectly, but okay, refreshing worked. Okay, so let's not be too enamored by gurus. That's all. No, it came up in a conversation over email. It's nothing to do with anything. It's just to do with something specific, and it came to my attention that maybe sometimes people treat me a little too well, and I don't want that. I don't think it's proper, and it's dangerous for me. It's dangerous for you. It's not proper. I don't think. But I might be wrong. So don't take my word for it. When is one ready to be without a teacher? I mean, technically you're ready to be without a teacher when you're an arahant, and they do use language like that. Achieved independence in the Buddha Sasana. That's the wording in the Pali. When you become an arahant, that's it. So technically we all should have teachers until then. But that means having the Buddha as your teacher. You don't need the Buddha as... You can still learn things from the Buddha, but you don't need him as your teacher until then. Or after that. You don't need him as your teacher after that. And until then, again, any way you can do well with a teacher. So, okay, but to be with a teacher, as a monk, 5 years, but hey, that's not even necessary in terms of meditation. You can think of it like that until you become an arahant, teachers are important. Do you need them all the time? No. Should you, study and learn and refer to the teachings? Yes. Yeah, you need it. It's important. What distinguishes neither perception nor non-perception from cessation? Well, I don't know much about perception, neither perception nor non-perception, though I have a general idea of what exactly that's referring to. But cessation, it may not be clear in the beginning, but for someone who experiences cessation repeatedly, it becomes quite clear what the difference is. That's all I can say. It's not intellectual. There's no sign that flashes on in cessation, in neither perception nor non-perception. No. But it becomes quite clear for one who has experienced them. So over time, in the beginning it might be like, was that this? Was that that? But the difference is distinct. Almost deleted this one, but I think, it's a good question. But I kind of shy away from these, what do you think about? What are the differences between, etc. But I think this could be useful because, of course, people come to Buddhism and they see all these different traditions. So this is an old question, actually, I think. The difference between Ajahn Chah and Mahasi Sayadaw style of meditation. So I'm not going to answer this probably completely. But from what I know of Ajahn Chah, and see, I don't even want to really speculate or talk about Ajahn Chah, no matter how interesting this question might be. But from what I know about him, he had his own style of meditation, to be not overly vague, I hope. And it was quite different in technique from what we practice. So it's important to understand that there's no reason to think that every single school of Buddhism is generally leads to the same results as each other. So from where I sit, it may very well be that Ajahn Chah and his whole group of monks were on a limited path, or probably not the wrong path, that would be hard to say. But as far as I know, none of them became enlightened. Now, of course, they would all be up in arms to hear such a thing being said. So I hope I don't get too many evil comments about, or nasty negative comments because of that. But it's important to be aware of that fact. Now, from my point of view, I can say that in the Mahasi tradition, that's not the case. There is the potential for realization of enlightenment, or arahantship even. The potential to see Nibbana, let's say. So, all I mean by that is I don't know much about the Ajahn Chah tradition, but I do want to say that as far as any of you know, none of these traditions lead to enlightenment, and so don't just be thinking that it's only a matter of technique, etc., etc. There's different factors involved in nuances. So I think what I can say is that the Mahasi technique is fairly distinct, though not exactly innovative. It's actually quite conservative in terms of, at least in terms of following the Theravada commentarial tradition, the Theravada interpretative tradition of the Buddha's teaching. So there's the use of mantras, and particularly mantras relating to the four satipatthana, which I think is fairly unique among the modern traditions, but doesn't seem at all innovative to me. It seems quite in line with what you read in the text if you spend some time really trying to think of what exactly they're saying. So a lot of groups in Thailand use mantras for Buddhanusati. And as far as I know, that's the sort of thing Ajahn Chah and a lot of those monks were into. I don't know if I've talked about this before on open mic, but it was a little bit fascinating reading some of this stuff. Not really in a good way, but fascinating reading some of the stuff coming out of, not Ajahn Chah actually. In fact, I might be leading you on a red herring here, because Ajahn Chah was impressive in a good way to me, but still, just as to give us an example, and then I'll try to swing back to what I think of Ajahn Chah, but there's a lot of mixing of techniques. Like, a big thing in Thailand is to watch the breath, and by Thailand I actually mean homegrown Thai techniques, because the technique I practice, of course, is more homegrown Burmese technique, or it's from Burma. But in Thailand, there's a lot of watching the breath and at the same time saying Buddho, Buddho. Okay? Now, what I've said before in some places, though I'm not sure YouTube, is that it's fascinating to see what happens when you do that, because from a point of view of the Theravada orthodoxy, that's mixing techniques. You would never do that. If you're going to focus on the Buddha, you would focus on the Buddha. Nothing to do with the breath. Nothing at all to do with the breath. You would say Buddho, 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 and your mind would be focused not on the breath, but on the Buddha. There's nothing that I can think of anywhere, and I may be wrong, but I challenge anyone, and I'd be happy to read it, to find me a place in the Tipitaka commentaries where there's anything like that, where you would call the breath Buddha, right? Or you would focus on the breath while saying Buddha. The nearest thing is counting. You count the breath. But that's, of course, related. It's related to the breath. You're counting breaths. There's nothing to do with the Buddha in the breath. So the fascinating part is when you do that, and you listen to some of the talks that these guys give, Buddha means one who knows. And so suddenly the breath becomes one who knows, and you're watching the breath, and the breath body, and the consciousness of the breath. And they say things like, when you do this, you realize the one who knows, the knower. And it sounds so much like a self that you kind of feel like this teacher has gotten off track. And some of the things I've read, Pulu, one who knows that doesn't die, the mind that doesn't die. I actually think Ajahn Chah uses that terminology, but I may be wrong. I hope I'm wrong, because I really kind of was impressed by the things he wrote. But there was definitely some teacher who was talking about the knower, the mind that doesn't die, which is really unsettling to hear, because it doesn't sound at all like Theravada Buddhism. So, then there's another group in Thailand that's actually been accused of a lot of unorthodoxy, so it's not really fair to include them beyond a cursory mention, but for interest's sake, because it's related. They watch the breath, say Buddho, Buddho. Actually, they say Samma Arahang, which is basically the same, and visualize a light, a crystal. Well, let's say a light, a crystal. Fine. So you now have 3 perfectly orthodox meditation techniques, perfectly. Looking at a light, or let's say a light, let's not say crystal, but okay, if it was a crystal, but let's say light. Visualizing a light is perfectly orthodox. It's in the orthodox commentaries. Saying Samma Arahang, perfectly orthodox. It's a verified, bona fide Buddhist meditation technique. Watching the breath, absolutely. The Buddha was highly salutary or recommended often to practice anapanasati. But here you have this curious case of people mixing 3 techniques. And so what is the result? It's actually unsurprising, but it's fascinating. Suddenly, the knower, the mind that doesn't die, is this light. And this light is the self, this crystal is the self, is nibbana. And they've suddenly mixed all these things together and the way they talk, it's quite remarkable. So mixing techniques like that, some of the things you see in some traditions, I feel comfortable, I feel confident, but kind of uncomfortable in terms of potential backlash. Pointing out what appears to be concerning. That being said, it's not really a concern of mine. Well, no, it should be, I suppose, because we want to, if we honestly, sincerely feel that something is out of line, then we should say, or at least point it out. So back to Ajahn Chah. I'm not sure if he was one who said that the mind doesn't die, or if it was some other monk. I do know that he has said that the jhanas, he said something remarkable in a good way. Because a lot of his students, I've had conversations with his students where they praise the samatha jhanas as being necessary, as being the cat's meow in terms of the way to enlightenment. Do you know that saying, the cat's meow? It's a very old English saying. It means the greatest thing in the world. And they're great, there's no question. But they said, one of his students said in a book quite clearly that it's not possible to cling to the jhanas. So I was like, okay, well, I'm not convinced, I'm not sure that it's proper to say that, but it does feel like some people are quite attached to them. And then I read Ajahn Chah, and I've written this, I wrote this a long time ago on my weblog. I said, I was ranting about this, saying, how I was a little bit harsh on this teacher, and someone got very upset at me at what I'd written. A few people. It actually got passed around, and I became, I think, a little bit infamous for a short time because of the things I said about this fairly well-known teacher. But so I was writing about this, and then suddenly I was reading. I said, okay, well, let's look and see what Ajahn Chah says. And I read what he said, and it was just eye-opening. He says, the jhanas are based on craving. That's the words. I mean, it's an English translation, so I don't have the Thai. If I had it, I could confirm it. I can understand Thai. But he said that, I was like, whoa, I wouldn't even go that far. But this is Ajahn Chah being translated by his students. And I appreciate that he acknowledges that. I don't know that I would even go so far as to say that they're based. I mean, I don't know that's the exact word, but it was quite strong. He was praising them, and then he said, but, they're limited because they're based on craving. There's a... And okay, so we should really look at the actual Thai translation, but it certainly was something along that line. Or the original, Thai original. So things like that. Like, I think he was quite open-minded. I do kind of take issue with the fact that he says, but it's not very strong language. He says, I don't see how it would be possible to practice only vipassana without samatha. So, okay, that's fine. I mean, I get that he doesn't see that. And I kind of agree with him in the sense that, well, because he says, like picking up a log, if you pick up one end, the other end comes with it. So I get that. You practice vipassana, of course samatha comes along, and our teachers acknowledge that. Right, anyway, I don't want to focus too much on this sort of question, but, as you can see, it's interesting. So I hope that was somehow revealing, helpful, useful. Do we have free will? If so, to what extent? Right, give me the easy questions, why don't you? Do we have free will? I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but let's unpack it. We don't exist. We is just a concept. The world isn't like that. Reality from a Buddhist perspective isn't the way you are looking at it, in terms of there being entities who have things, or that have things. Okay? So reality is not about, does this do this, does that do that. Reality is about what there is in the realm of experience. So again, the words are strange because you say, well, something experiences there because something experiences. But that's Western language. I mean, that's English. I don't even know if there's any language on earth that is properly Buddhist, because all language is based on our delusions of self and so on. But reality is experience. It's phenomena that arise and cease. They don't arise and cease randomly. There's a causal relationship. So the idea of free will, and I'm not the Buddha who can explain this to you in the perfect way, but the idea of free will is suspect, is problematic from the get-go, because it makes assumptions and it uses language relating to agency. You see, agency is not exactly a part of reality. It's not the right way of looking at things. Really, an easier way of looking at this is stop thinking about self and look at experience, right? Look at the world in terms of what is going on in experience, and what is good, what is bad, what is right, what is wrong, what is consistent, what is inconsistent. I mean, don't even think about those things, but just look and see. When you observe ultimate reality, you naturally free yourself from suffering. It's a natural process. That's all you really need to think about, right? I mean, it sounds very practical and perhaps avoiding these sorts of questions of free will. Well, so be it. These questions don't help. But there's reason, I think, to believe that they don't help. beyond the fact that you can see for yourself when you engage in them, they don't help. And when you can see for yourself when you give them up, that helps. So I hope that helps. Okay, 2 questions. A person apologizes for asking 2 questions because they know I normally delete multiple parts, but okay. I have a large number of deceased insects all over my new home. What is a compassionate way to dispose of them? I don't understand, because deceased means dead. So there's no compassion involved in dead things. If it's dead, the mind is gone. So compassion doesn't play a role. If you mean diseased, that's a different issue. But I'm not quite sure. Let's assume you're talking about something alive, because I've already answered. If they're dead, don't worry about it. You don't have to have a funeral for the bugs. But if they're alive, dealing with bugs is not a simple issue. And there's lots of complexities. Just in terms of how to deal with this insect, how to deal with that insect. But, yes, if you want to be Buddhist, you don't kill them. Period. Ever. Okay, so you have to be creative to find ways to deal with insects without killing them. And believe me, I know how challenging it can be. I've lived with termites. I've lived with ants crawling up my walls. I lived with a bird nesting in my kuti, and eventually I knocked the nest out because it was making a mess. And because I heard that they can carry diseases. So I knocked it out. Next day the bird comes into the room. I felt awful. I felt so low. This poor bird looking at me like I was just dirt. Looking at me like I was Satan. I'll never do that again. It was wrong. I think it was wrong from a Buddhist perspective, and definitely from a culturally Buddhist perspective. You just try not to disturb beings like that. So, if you want to be really Buddhist, you don't even knock birds' nests out. I mean, it wasn't a nest. It was one of those mud birds. They bring mud in. What do you think of that?
What do you mean? What I think?
What do you think of knocking it out and making them go find another place to nest?
You probably in that situation probably did the same thing
Yeah,
you did.
yeah.
Unless you find your own way
But
somewhere else.
But you should have seen these birds after I did it. It was just so awful. It's like, oh, I feel so low. Anyway, I've started leaving offerings to my statue of the Buddha. This offering includes water and cooked rice. What is an appropriate offering, and how often should I change them out? Okay, I'm going to say something rather heretical here. I don't believe it's proper. Let's not go there. I'm not really fond of the idea of offering food to the Buddha. I don't think it particularly reflects the culture of the monastics or the lay people in the time of the Buddha. So if you want to follow that tradition, it doesn't seem wise, or it seems a little bit dumb, honestly. Because food smells, it's disgusting, it's, unpleasant. And you're putting it in front of the most beautiful thing in the world. A thing that is not going to partake of that food, does not experience hunger now that he's passed away. It just seems totally inappropriate to me. Now, that being said, it's I said this in front of a room full of Sri Lankans. I did say this. Oh boy. I mean, I said it in a roundabout way, or I said it in a speculative way, like, actually, And they were, actually, I think I said it in front of a group of PhD students in Florida. But they were quite, wide-eyed about it. I don't remember where I said that, but The point, I mean, a point I'd make there is we should always be open to challenging and questioning our practices. Is this just rites and rituals? What the heck are we doing here? So what is your motivation for putting food in front of the Buddha? Like, you think he's going to eat it, or you want to pretend like he's going to eat it? It's dumb. I mean, it's not even the most valuable thing that you have. Food is cheap. It's like make-believe. It's like a dollhouse. Oh, that's... Sanim is shaking her head at me. No, why? Because the things that you do and should put in front of the Buddha are things that are symbolic. And so people say, well, food is symbolic. Of what? Diarrhea? I don't know. Flowers are symbolic. Candles are symbolic. Or light. Incense. That's a beautiful tradition to me. You could even criticize that. You could say flowers are just attachment to sights. Same with candles. Incense. No, candles are actually interesting, but incense is just, didn't the Buddha say we should not cling to smells? What are we doing here? But symbolically, there's something there. The flowers are something, I don't know, beautiful. And the Buddha was, in a figurative way, beautiful. His teachings were beautiful. Adi kalyanang, majje kalyanang, pariyosana kalyanang. Beautiful in the beginning, beautiful in the middle, beautiful in the end. So we, out of respect for that beauty, we do it. I mean, I'm just ignorant, I think, in some ways. So I may very well be wrong about this, but I have thought about it. And I'd like to, challenge this and be challenged. Hopefully no one gets really angry because I'm saying this. That would be very un-Buddhist of them, no matter whether I'm wrong or right. But candles, or in Sri Lanka they use butter dishes, coconut oil with a little wick in it, but it's a candle, right? Are I think highly appropriate because it's light. Light isn't something you're attached to, but light dispels darkness. The symbolism of light is very powerful. So in Sri Lanka they do incense, but they're more focused on these lights. And to me that sort of tradition, you see that in Buddhist, like in Thailand we have something called Wien Tien. Wien means to go around, Tien is the candles. We go with candles around the pagoda. We also use candles, or we use incense and flowers as well, but fine. I mean, that to me seems okay. Flowers, candles, I think for monks you have to be questioning, because flower making is not allowed for monks. Putting flowers together in a bouquet, it's actually against the rules, as far as I understand. So we should question this still, but as far as traditions go, that seems good to me. Giving food to the Buddha, yeah. It's okay if lay people want to do it, but you're asking me, I would say stick to flowers, candles, and incense. Where you do use food, and it should be completely vegetarian, it's interesting. This is an interesting thing that's cultural, but also interesting from a Buddhist perspective. Vegetarian food as offerings for angels, devas. Yeah, devas who protect the place. My teacher talked about this. I mean, he's very culturally Thai. I mean, a lot of the things he does, I'm kind of like, I may not do that. But the angels who guard places, you respect them and you appreciate them, and giving offerings to them is, I think, it's a fine. I mean, it shows them that you appreciate them. But it should be vegetarian food. That's the only thing I would say. And water. Anyway, not probably quite the answer you were looking for. What is right view? How should one practice right view? Right view is, I guess I'll take the easy way out, but the Buddha said, right view is, this is suffering, this is the cause of suffering, this is the cessation of suffering, and this is the path that leads to the cessation of suffering. When you know the truth about those four things, that's right view. So if you believe that Buddhist monks, Buddhism is suffering. Or, no, I'm thinking of people who are not Buddhist, but if you believe that the pain in your back is, well, that's not really fair because it is suffering, but cause of suffering, let's say. If you believe Korean bhikkhunis are the cause of suffering, that's wrong view. If you believe that not believing in, no, it's not a really good one. No, if you believe X, Y, or Z is the cause of suffering, that's not craving. But if you have view that craving is the cause of suffering, or tanha is the cause of suffering, then that's right view. So these four things. View itself is on different levels. I hope you can appreciate. Like if you've studied that, well, that's one level of right view. It doesn't mean you actually have it. Noble right view is the moment when you realize the Four Noble Truths, like really not just intellectually, but you suddenly have this wake up where they become the experience you have. Your experience is, this is suffering, this is the cause of suffering. This is the cessation of suffering, and this is the path that leads to the cessation of suffering. That's right view. That's noble right view. So it goes in stages. And during vipassana practice, you're cultivating right view. It just becomes noble at that last moment. Yeah, this question, I don't want to be too harsh, but you say, I clearly see the ego as an illusion. Whatever you see is not it's not something to hold on to. Whatever you're talking about, you should let go of it right away. Forget about it. Not that it's worthless, but if you're holding on to it, it sounds like you are holding on to it. It's only going to be a obstruction to your path. What you should focus on is whatever it is that you call kicking in fear of its own death. So there's fear, there's worry, there's doubt, I think. Those should all be addressed because they're hindrances. But you should address them with mindfulness, and you should stop thinking in terms of ego death, fear of its own death, kicking in fear. How do I know if it's the right time for ego death? Stop using those words. I don't use that word. So if you want my advice, and maybe you don't, or maybe after this you won't, ego death is not words I use. No, I get what you're getting at, but it's just a buzzword. It's just, stop with the labels. Don't use such labels. Focus more on reality. What are you experiencing? Ego death is just something you've conjured up as an experience. And it does kind of refer to something that I can relate to, but I don't think it's proper to use such terminology like buzzwords. I don't know what the correct term is. But you don't ever want to turn in something into an ism, right? Reify anything. Look at what you're experiencing. Stop trying to think of, am I ready for ego death, etc., etc. Throw that away. It's useless to you. Focus on what you're experiencing. Enlightenment is only when you've overcome all this doubt and uncertainty and fear. That's just, the natural result of letting go of all these things that you do seem to be still holding on to. Is this Friday a Theravada observance day to commemorate the day the Buddha gave his first sermon? I think you know it isn't. You're just trying to say something in a question form. No, I think this is a request for me to give a talk. Because we were talking about this recently. I don't know if you're in our group, Tim, but our study group, but actually I don't think you are. So this is genuine. It's just Friday is a Salaha Puja, right? Is it Friday? So Saturday, I was thinking Friday our study group will maybe do something special. And Saturday I'll give a talk. Maybe Saturday will be the first day of the Wasa, the rainy season. So I'll give a talk on Saturday. So let's do that. The talk will be on, let's see, how can lay followers best spend the day? Oh, but it'll be too late, won't it? All right, well then I better say something today. But not a short Dhamma talk, not today. So the best way is to keep the 8 precepts. And of course things like meditating and listening to the Dhamma. That's all I'm going to say today. Because really you should be doing that every day. From time to time at least. And then listening to talks and meditating every day. What advice does Buddhism give for those who have experienced anatta spontaneously but cannot find a way to repeat the experience through meditation? So this is a similar thing. Let go of that experience, throw it away, cast it aside. It's been and done, it's gone. That's not how this works. Insights aren't something you cling to, you chase after. Mindfulness should be your only single concern ever. Okay, there's other auxiliary concerns, but your main concern, never lose sight of mindfulness and never lose focus on that. Insights come because you're mindful. And some of the insights will surprise you in the sense that, oh, I thought that was insight, but now this comes and it's like a totally different level of insight. It should really surprise you and show you things that you absolutely were not aware of in any way, shape, or form about yourself. So just be open and don't worry about past insight. There's no need to worry about insight. That's why I don't like to really call what we do vipassana, because we don't do vipassana. Vipassana is the result, but it only comes from mindfulness. So that's what we practice. We practice mindfulness. I just realized I didn't go to the YouTube live streaming page. I'm assuming it's live streaming, but I didn't set it up properly. Stream health is on yellow. That's not very good. Yeah, the title is wrong. So let's see if I can change this. What day is today? 25th. Okay. I don't know if that is actually going to change the title, but right. So we have 75 people watching. It's really gone up. That's really good to see. Okay, so I hope I've answered that. Okay. Sometimes the discourses of Buddhism can be interpreted as selfish, ironically. Could you explain what it is the Buddhist concept of helping others? Helping others, you help yourself. Helping yourself, you help others. I don't think this should be as big an issue as people make of it, because Buddhism is really about both. There is a difference of how far you want to go with one or the other. For some people, they just want to go off in the forest and help themselves. For other people, they just want to go off in the world and help others. I like to think that we should all be somewhere in the middle. Even the Buddha. Even the Buddha himself didn't stick around. He didn't say, oh, I won't go to Nibbana. I'll help everyone. Didn't do it. Not in the text I read anyway. But another thing I wanted to say is, so what? What's wrong with being selfish? It's a good question. What's wrong with wanting to help yourself? You might say, and I think rightly say, no, you should rightly say, if you cast off, ignore, or deny someone else help when they ask for it, there's going to be problems with your own enlightenment there. But it doesn't mean you have to help people. Some people never get asked. Some people never encounter that experience where someone wants your help. And that, I don't see what's wrong with that. I think it's wrong to think that there's something wrong with that. But I do think it's wrong that if and when you're asked, and if and when someone needs your help, you consciously and I want to hedge what I say here, because I don't think it's even always wrong to do that in certain instances. But you can see maybe what I'm getting at when you're consciously cruel to a person who needs your help. I think there's something wrong with that. Until what extent can the senses be decoupled from our experience of them? I mean, for example, for hearing to become hearing in such a way that words from something are not mapped onto meaning in the brain and just be sound. That happens in meditation. So I don't really understand the question or why you're trying to ask what extent they can be decoupled. I suppose it's interesting. It's not quite... I guess I do want to say that it's not really the point. So you're maybe a little off track there. Because when you do recognize that that's a cat that you're hearing, meow, that's another experience. The experience of cat in your mind is sanya. And when you like or dislike it, you should be mindful of that. So it's not about stopping any of that. It's about observing and learning about it and refining it in a way that leads to less suffering. Is it good karma to give money to someone as a donation when you know he's going to use it for drugs and alcohol? Yes, in fact it is. Because giving something does not relate to results. This is the whole thing about eating meat, right? Is it wrong to eat meat because you know the person, you know it's going to lead to more killing? Is it wrong to buy meat because you know the person is going to use that money to kill more animals? That's not how karma works. Karma works by the mind state in your mind at the moment that you do something. And it's not complicated. It's not like, are you considering the social ramifications of this act? It's not what karma is. Karma is, what is the quality of your mind? Simple quality. Are you greedy at that moment? Are you angry at that moment? No. So the question is, can you eat meat with a pure mind? Yes, absolutely. At the moment of eating meat, chewing. There's nothing directly connected between eating meat and cruelty. Of course, it's a minefield because it's very easy to become callous and cruel in regards to eating and buying meat. So it is something that is questionable, problematic. The same with giving donations to people who you know are going to use it for drugs and alcohol. Quite probably you'll be sad when you know that they're going to do that. But the exact moment when you give, and this is possible, I mean, it's a part of Buddhist practice to stop thinking so much. At the moment when you give, your intention is for someone to benefit, for someone to gain something. You know, your intention is, this is a good thing, and I want this person to have it. So yes, you give to an unethical person. The Buddha said, and I agree with what is written, that you benefit a lot from it. That being said, he also said, you benefit a lot more from giving to an ethical person. So understand that. Because, of course, there's potential for so much better karma and stronger positive mind states when you give to someone who is ethical. It's a good question, but it has answers. This one, I don't know actually. I don't know what's going on here, but maybe I should just delete this one. I don't know. I mean, it is a curious question. Let's answer it. Wouldn't... oops, now I've deleted it. Have I deleted it? I did. I deleted it. So it's something like, wouldn't consciousness and awareness be the seventh sense? No, it's the sixth sense. I don't know what you would call the sixth sense besides that. That's, I guess, the answer. I mean, if you're talking about like extrasensory perception, that's just Western terminology. It's not a sense, it's just a magical power. Siddesh has now been meditating for 19 to 20 months. This guy, since he started, every time he asks a question, he tells me how many months he's meditated for. He's up to 19 to 20 now. It's cute. It's really cute. I appreciate it. Really, congratulations, Siddesh. I appreciate that you've kept up with me now for 19 to 20 months. How can I deal with unethical and hypocritical people? But he always has questions like this that I'm not sure are a little too vague. I mean, they're good questions, but they're a little too vague. I'm not smart enough to answer that. Unethical and hypocritical people. How do you deal with people who are unethical? And well, try and stay away from them. If you have to be near them, try and be mindful. Try not to worry about people so much as experiences, because they might rob you blind. But what does that mean? They change your experiences. That's all it means. Experience is still just seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, feeling, thinking. You explained that attachment to family, loved ones does not bring happiness. What a downer, huh? And is just as meaningless as attachment to other desires. I wonder what value is there to honoring commitments, connections to loved ones out of care and compassion for their sakes rather than your own. Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, in general, there's good to be had from having a good relationship with your family. And I think that's a very good reason, because these are people who have strong attachments to you. And they're people who love you in a good sense, in the sense of wanting you to be happy, wanting to help you. And so engaging with them is going to be, I mean, if that's the case. The Buddha said it's a blessing if that's the case, because so much good can come from it. Family does great things for each other from a Buddhist perspective. Your family supports you, that's dana. I mean, doing that for each other, that's great. So family does cultivate a lot of wholesomeness. If you deny that, I mean, a part of the anger is, what people in the world would call justified. Justified because you're wrong. You're wrong to discard and throw away family. I mean, you're not technically wrong, but practically, yeah, you're deluded in terms of if you think that that's a good thing. Because so much good is just wasted. All that potential, all that love, all that appreciation, and all that goodness they've done for you that you really should try and pay back, Things like that. The Buddha's decision to leave his family when seeking enlightenment, it was the best thing he could do for them. I mean, look what the results were. His wife became an arahant, his son became an arahant, his father became a sotapanna, his mother became a sotapanna, his aunt became an arahant. All of his relatives, the majority of them became arahants, probably why his lineage kind of died out. You don't hear about the Buddha's relatives all that often. That's what I think about it. I've made progress with anxiety. Thank you for that. That feels great to hear, because I think the implication is that the things I've said have helped. So awesome. I mean, one of the big reasons for doing this is because of how easy it is to help people, how little effort. I know that doesn't sound right, but what I mean to say is, it's amazing that this isn't being. It is, but it's a shame if this isn't done. Because it's just a little bit is all it takes to help someone with anxiety, that sort of thing. At this point, when it arises, I note disliking. You should also note anxious, and so on, the feelings in the body and so on. But this anxiety keeps returning and the cycle repeats. That's a part of what we're trying to see, that it's not under your control. You can't get rid of it. What you want to do is become tired and kind of sick of the cycle. Sick is a bit too strong, but the word we use is disenchanted, meaning disobsessed, unobsessed, unfixated on it. And how that comes is by seeing it over and over and over and over, and seeing the suffering involved with getting anxious over and over and over. It really has to be like that. You really have to get anxious until you're kind of sick of it. The Buddha said, Atani bindati dukhe. By seeing impermanence, suffering, non-self, by seeing that these things are just incessant and uncontrollable and so on, you become nibbita, you become bored of it, or stop being obsessed with it, stop trying to fix it, trying to control it, and so on. Esamago visuddhya, this is the path of, And yes, you can don't disliking for 30 minutes, but don't try to make it go away. Which seems silly because, well, don't you want the anxiety to go away? It's not exactly like that. As you can see, it doesn't work. But what works is observing it. It's going to come, let it come. It's going to go, there it goes. Until you understand it and understand how silly it is. Oh, we're chasing new questions now. Should I allow the existence of gods, ghosts, spirits to distract me from the core teachings? No, you shouldn't. As I've never experienced such things, I find it impossible to integrate into my worldview or seriously consider. Yeah, well, stop trying to consider them. If you ever meet one, you'll say, that's what they were talking about. I think that's all you should concern yourself with. Keeping an open mind, it is interesting to think of the world and the universe being more than us. It would be kind of silly if this was all there was. But I wouldn't worry about it too much. Keep an open mind. Stop being, fixated on this, what I experience is all there is of reality. What science tells me. Because there could be so much more. How do you forgive yourself for hurting someone in the past? Just experience it. Experience the pain, experience the guilt, be mindful of it, stop beating yourself up over it, stop, you will, if you beat yourself up over it, be mindful of that. But stop thinking that this is right. Get right view about it, which means to see it for what it is. That's all. Don't need to forgive yourself. You just need to see clearly and let it go, Look at when you hate yourself, when you're angry at yourself for it. Look at that as part of the meditation practice. It's an appropriate meditation object. I was wondering about the Buddhist view of caring for others. How do you reconcile causing pain or discomfort for the ultimate well-being of an animal, person, or any living being? It's a good question. I think I understand. You're thinking of, suppose there were a case of a broken leg. No, there was this case of a cat that had been mauled by a dog, and we're in a meditation center because there's all sorts of cats and dogs, and it's just hell for them. Like they eat each other and kill each other and fight with each other. It's just awful. You got to wonder if some of the old poorly behaved monks and nuns were reborn as dogs and cats. It's not far-fetched to think so if you've ever lived in a large monastery, in Thailand anyway. But no, I don't mean to be so uncharitable. But yes, so this cat was in bad shape, and so they called a vet. The lay people, I was involved with the lay people teaching there, and they called the vet, and the vet came and stitched up this cat. And one of the lay meditation teachers, sorry, I'm going to embarrass her, I think, she grabbed the cat by the scruff of the neck, and she was holding it, and the guy was stitching it up, and he didn't use anesthetic, I don't think, and the sounds the cat made, we were all just sickened by it, and she fainted. it was something to watch. I'd never seen anyone faint in front of me, and she fainted. I mean, it was really that gruesome. So it's a question: did we perform bad karma, all of us, or the person who did the stitching? I think potentially, yeah. It's complicated. I got into this, and I really look back on it and think, what was I doing? Trying to keep the cats from fighting, trying to look after kittens that had been orphaned. And I was doing this as a monk even. No, maybe Sinim maybe not won't agree with my perspective. I don't know, but some monastics certainly won't. But looking back, it just seems futile. It seems like, why are you getting involved with such... Oh, I'm going to get in trouble for this one. I know people go to Thailand and they take so good care. They set up these societies to take care of the dogs. I'm not going to win on this one. That's never stopped me before. Unpopular. I made a video about cats, and it's the only video. I ended up, I think, taking it down because it's the only video where I actually got like 10 times more down votes than up votes. I said, don't get a cat, cats are evil, something like that. First rule of the internet, don't say bad things about cats. Anyway, cats are evil. That being said, it's a generalization, yes, but people don't realize the murder that cats do. Anyway, that's not your question, is it? So what I'm trying to say, and what relates to your question, is that getting involved in this way is getting involved in samsara. It's the kind of thing that doctors do, and I don't think it's fair to say that doctors always do good. That, from a Buddhist perspective, is being a doctor good karma? I don't think it always is. Because the mind states, it's not because the overarching, hey, we're healing people, what are you talking about? It's not good karma. It's that not every moment of a doctor's psyche is going to be wholesome. So people who get involved with taking care of animals, I've done it. I've been there, done that. Even as a monk, I was doing it. It's such a distraction. What help can you do? What are you going to do? It's reminiscent in my mind, or it reminds me of this Sariputta and the Bodhisattva, I think is what it was. Or maybe it was Sariputta and Moggallana. And Moggallana, I can't remember what this was, the Buddha, the Bodhisattva and Sariputta maybe. Sariputta was going around giving 5 precepts to everyone. And he comes back to the monastery, and the Bodhisattva is shoveling and kicking and just seems to be going insane. And Sariputta says, what are you trying to do? He says, I'm trying to level the earth, make it flat. And Sariputta says, you're crazy. What's wrong with you? What's wrong with you? You're trying to do something that's impossible. And the Bodhisattva says, what's wrong with you? You're trying to make everyone follow the 5 precepts. How that relates is trying to fix samsara is basically what you're talking about here. So that's not your question, but the succinct answer to your question is that mind states are complicated, and I don't think we should give a blanket carte blanche or a free pass to people who get involved in physical healing of other people for various reasons, but specifically in terms of this kind of causing harm in order to heal. That being said, from a practical perspective as a lay person, for example, a doctor, overall, you are doing good deeds. I don't think it's something you really have to concern yourself with, which I hope isn't a complete capitulation from what I just said. I don't think it's something you have to worry about, and I think, in general, as a practical way of life, it's good to help people, help beings, help animals physically. Help alleviate their suffering as best you can. Yeah, it's maybe a little more complicated than I made it appear there, but I just wanted to say that I don't think we should be obsessed with this kind of activity in terms of trying to help physically, beings that are hurt and so on. Within reason, right? Again, it comes down to what is a part of your life and what is something you have ambition towards. Do you form an SPCA or something like that? It's nice, it's good, but I don't know. It seems highly roundabout and problematic for these sorts of reasons. You're going to stitch up, and I don't know. I have a big question mark over it, I suppose. I'm suspicious of it. I hope that's not too harsh. And I suppose if I can point one thing out, it's that karma is more complicated than just saying, I'm doing a good deed by helping this person. Karma is your momentary mind states. And it's hard to be completely wholesome when you get involved mucking around in injuries and so on. That's all I wanted to say. Not that it's wrong, not that you should feel bad about doing it or stop doing it even. But so it's a good question, actually. And I don't want to, please don't cling to anything I just said there, like he believes this and that's wrong. Okay, if it's wrong, cool. I'm totally open to being wrong, and I'll accept that. So let's not get angry at each other, but let's acknowledge that it's an interesting question and complicated. Okay? Thank you. Why is it so hard to meditate on a consistent basis? I know I should do it, but for some reason I fall off the wagon. Because we're influenced by our surroundings is a big reason. Because we're influenced by our habits internally. So internally and externally we're influenced. You see, it's much easier when you're in a meditation center to do it. It's also much easier when you're already enlightened. So these two factors, I would say, to answer your question simply. The internal and the external. Anto jata bahijata. The inner tangle and the outer tangle. Find yourself good companions for the external tangle, and practice more meditation and be patient, because it takes time for the internal tangle. And that's it. We caught up. That's all the questions. That's the Dhamma for tonight. Thank you all for tuning in. Have a good night.